Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Meshar. I'm your host today on Access to Democracy. And my guest today is Mike McIntee, co-founder of the Uptake. Really, it's an online media. And Mike, welcome back to the show. You've been on Access to Democracy before, and we're happy to have you back.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah. I think for new viewers or people who maybe didn't see you when you were on last time, we just want to take a moment to kind of share how you got to the Uptake and maybe a little bit about your journey, your background, and how that came to exist. So,
my background is television. I did television for about a quarter century. It sounds like a long time, doesn't it? Working for local TV and then for network television, and ran a national television 24-hour news network. But then that went away, and then I worked with some other people to start some independent media, and that was the Uptake. We started that about in 2007 with the idea of covering the Republican National Convention here in the Twin Cities. We said, here's a great opportunity to show what's going on, and just a few weeks before the convention, we discovered how we could live stream video using iPhones, and so that revolutionized everything.
wow, yeah.
We were showing everything that was going on outside the convention, all of the all of the protests and everything, and all the interesting things that happened there. And all the networks were locked inside the Excel Center, and so we had exclusive, interesting coverage that other people didn't.
Which got the Uptake up and running, basically, and made it popular among people that want to know a little bit different viewpoint of what's going on out there, correct?
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. It's the legacy media, as I call it, because it's not the mainstream media, it's the legacy media, is very locked into telling one particular narrative, and that's usually driven by, the people that own it, the corporations.
Or sponsors, yes. So this way, people get a different point of view, and there are many. So Uptake provides a good one for local events that's maybe not driven by large moneyed interests, let's say. Yeah.
That's exactly. It's driven by the passion of the people who want to cover the story.
So very nice, very nice. Now, I know you have a current project and focus that you want to share with us today that's been going on and will soon be launched, actually, or premiered, I guess you want to say. So a film coming up. Tell us more.
We have a film that's called How Love Won, The Fight for Marriage Equality in Minnesota. And it's, I think most people who live here in Minnesota are pretty familiar with the story, at least the outlines of it, that there was an amendment trying to, make gay marriage illegal in Minnesota, which it already was, but we're going to write it into the Constitution. That was defeated, and then a few months later, we made same-sex marriage legal in Minnesota. The Uptake covered this story as it happened, and when we got down to the end of it, I said, this is like a great movie. We should do a movie about this. And we backed up and we did. And we have all those historical events that you may or may not have seen as they happened, but we also have some incredible personal stories that just drive the narrative of this and make it so interesting. And the people who I've shown this to in small groups, there usually isn't a dry eye in the house when we get through it.
Personal stories are powerful, and of course this particular issue affected families directly, kids directly, and of course anything we can do to promote loving, stable relationships benefits society, there's no question. So this movie kind of highlights what was going on as this issue was unfolding.
Exactly, and it works. We see this through the eyes of the people who ended up volunteering for this, the people who were genuinely affected. It was, either they wanted to get married or they had a daughter or a son who was lesbian or gay, and they were very concerned about their future. And for a long time, the LGBT movement had been approaching this all as trying to say, we've got to talk about rights. We've got to talk about our rights because we have the right to get married. It's in the this is a constitutional right. And people don't want to talk, aren't moved to talk about rights. We had a large segment in the country that was dead set against this. We had another segment that was for this, and then we had this group in the middle. And the campaign figured out that they had to talk to those people in the middle, and they couldn't talk to it about rights. They had to talk to them about another way, and that's when they came up with the whole idea of talking about it about love. And that's what made the difference.
And that made the difference. Now, as you began this film, you needed to get funding. I know you needed, you just can't wake up one day and voila, money appears in your checking account and you can go out
and
make
when you
this
figure that
film.
out, let me know.
Yeah, so I know you used some new and kind of innovative ways to go ahead and fund your film. So
yeah, we asked the people who were interested in this topic to fund it. We used Kickstarter, and I think a lot of people by now have heard about Kickstarter, but back then, this is several years ago, not too many people had, and it's basically crowdfunding, but with a twist. If we don't raise the money that we say we need to do this, and at that time it was about $25,000, we said, we're not going to do it. It's, if you remember the old National Lampoon cover that they had the picture of the puppy and the gun, and they said, if you don't give us the money, we're going to... It wasn't quite that bad, but I mean, this is what it's like. You're trying to raise the money, and either you're going to do the project with enough money or you're not.
right.
And then that was enough money with all the volunteer help that we had to get the film shot, but to get it finished, we needed help, and luckily the state had a fund that essentially matched our money. This is through the legacy funding, and we were able to get another $25,000 to finish it all. Unfortunately, that fund is not there anymore because certain political interests in the legislature have decided that it should go away.
So, but it was hugely beneficial to helping you, fortunately, before that happened, and maybe with additional social change and political action, a similar fund can be started. But that brings us to the whole topic of political change, and the making of this film somehow changed the community in the making of this film. I mean, things happened. So say a little more about that.
Yeah, this was about, there was two changes going on here. There was the change that people, that the campaign was trying to make with the general population. They're trying to change the perception that, gays, lesbians, and marriage, this is all icky, I don't want to hear about it, to maybe I should let that happen because, well, who knows, my children may end up in that situation. And it was enough, putting that cognitive dissonance in there, a little bit of doubt that moved people. So that was one change that was going on. And, there was a change also going on in the general population at the time, because, President Obama had made some statements, and it was, the general pop culture was kind of becoming more accepting of this. But the real change in the movie, which is interesting, is how the people who were working within the movement changed. And they start out with the notion that, well, this marriage thing, one guy, his name is Steve in the movie, talks about how marriage isn't, well, he never really thought about it because, he knew he could never have it. He didn't think it was that important. But as he talked to more people and started talking on the phone about, trying to convince people about this and talking to them about their marriage, he realized that he really did want to get married. He wanted that because it makes a difference.
It does make a
It makes a real difference in how the relationship works. And yeah, I think there's a line in the movie where he says, I found out more about myself talking to other people on the phone than I ever thought I would.
Wow. So it was transformative for people who were part of the project.
It was transformative. And a lot of the movies about these conversations, because one of the techniques in the campaign was to not call people up. You get your typical political phone call that lasts 2 minutes. They ask you, are you going to support so-and-so? No, this was, let's talk about your relationship. Let me talk to you about mine. And these would go on for 5 or 10 minutes, and then people would call back trying to move. These are persuasion calls, trying to move people. And that's what had this impact, I think, a big impact on not just the population moving people to vote, but also the people who are making the phone calls.
Yes, and that having conversations is probably key to what can go on in a community when people are just open to listening what each person has to say, what they think, what they feel, and to know, I think it's important too to know that what I feel today may not be what I feel tomorrow, and maybe doesn't match what I felt yesterday, but it's where I stand or where I feel and what I'm thinking right now at the moment. So to recognize that our thoughts and ideas, opinions are fluid and can change and aren't locked in concrete,
No, and conversation is different than I'm right, you're wrong.
Yes.
I mean, it involves talking, but it also involves listening.
Yes.
And if I'm not actively listening to you and reacting to what you're saying, you're not going to take what I'm saying seriously. It has to be a give and take. And I think that's really a paradigm that we need to look at in politics, because so much of politics right now is one side yelling at the other, telling them, I'm right, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, And that doesn't get us anywhere.
No. And we have a tradition of that in Minnesota, of that conversation. We have the Day on the Hill that's done early in the year, where both Republicans and Democrats get together and decide what values do they agree on, what do they want for the community, and then go to visit legislators as a group and say, here's what we want as a community. You figure out how to get us there, but we want safe schools, we want safe neighborhoods, we want, good roads, and they agree on those ultimate outcomes, and they come together. And during the course of that day, people who are on opposite sides of the political spectrum have a chance to have a conversation and see that, yes, maybe the idea of how we get there might differ. The end result, what we both want, is very similar. So we have a tradition of listening that way and entering into the conversation.
It has, but what's been happening over the last 10 or 20 years is it's been getting amped up.
Yes.
And so much of politics is about gotcha, and that one thing you said, we're going to use it against you. And not trusting the other side, because you have to have trust to come to some sort of decision.
And about personalities too. It's about lifting up the personality, not the issue necessarily.
Exactly. And trust is something that I think that's lacking these days among even the lawmakers we have, because of this clash that we've seen going on. I did a documentary about 10 years ago where we talked to Minnesota lawmakers. And one of the things they said, this was back before they had computers and printouts and everything, there'd be one person that would have the bill in their hand. And you would trust them that what they were telling you was what was in the bill. Today, we see...
Not the case.
Not the case. We saw how the last legislative session ended, and it was in such chaos, and nobody knew what was in the bill. That's the kind of gamemanship that kind of goes on. And we've got to kind of drain the swamp first and get rid of that before we get back to having conversations.
Good point. So people were transformed in the making of this film. People became part of that process of discovery and kind of encountering people that were in a different place than they were. What about you as the person creating this film and moving through this, shepherding this project? How did it transform, or what changes did you notice?
Changes for me? Well, I mean, everybody in this movie, or a lot of people in this movie, talk about we're on a journey. We're on a journey to understand how we as how humanity comes together, how we can be better. I started this not really understanding the movement. I mean, I was an outside observer to this whole community, and understanding the not just the politics that are going on here, but the psychology that was going on here, and how deep all of these things were, to making social change, how important all these elements are. I learned a lot about that I didn't know before. And I think I made a lot of friends I wouldn't have made otherwise.
So relationships that maybe began and deepened at the same time.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the whole idea of this project moving the needle on social change. How could something like this be a blueprint maybe for other issues going forward?
Well, it's hard to break out each element and say, oh, that's the silver bullet, that's the silver bullet. A lot of things came together here that may not come together in other issues, but I think there are certain things you take a look at and say, okay, that's an important lesson out of this. I mean, we just talked about the whole idea of having a conversation,
yes,
as opposed to, I'm going to run negative ads and you're going to run negative ads, and we hope that I scare more of your supporters away than you scare my supporters away. I mean, that is the way too much of political campaigning is done these days.
Right.
Issue campaigning. I mean, I liken this to, there's maybe some of the lessons that we can take from this film we can apply to very contentious issues like guns. I don't think there's a person out there that wouldn't agree that having people killed in the United States at the rate that we have people being killed by guns,
it's a problem. Yeah,
that's a problem. I think there's a base point that everybody can start from. Okay, well then how do we build up from there? How do we find the agreement? As opposed to immediately jumping to, you're taking away my guns, and the Second Amendment guarantees. Let's somehow find a way to get away from that,
yes,
and focus on what we have in common instead of what we are just don't agree about.
And I think you're correct. That requires entering into conversation, entering into a relationship, being willing to listen, and then we start to see that there's maybe alternatives we hadn't thought of. Usually issues that are polarized, it's all or nothing. We are missing the rest of the universe around it, where there's many other options, many other possibilities, but we can't see them. We're kind of polarized into this way or that way. It's an either or instead of look at this option, or what about another option here, another way to handle it here. I think that conversation begins to help us slow down, to maybe exhale and see maybe there's another possibility.
Yeah. So much of what we decide is driven by emotion instead of logic.
Isn't it though? Yeah.
And that's the other lesson from this campaign, is that you can make logical arguments all you want. And in fact, in California, when Prop 8 first came up, Prop 8 was it was a successful attempt to take away the right for marriage equality in California, a very liberal state. And Prop 8 did that. And the reason that that happened was that people decided by emotion. They were scared. They were told, your children might might become gay because they'll be taught about this in school. And that ad, which they call the Princess ad, scared the hell out of people. What was learned here is that you've got to deal with the emotion of the issue as well as the logic. You can't just talk about the logic. You've got to start with the emotion. And so you got to find a way to calm people so they aren't going to be frightened by a particular thing, so that you can talk to them and then win them over to your side.
So head and heart. Can't do one or the other, has to be both, really.
Exactly.
Engage the head and the heart. I know you have a graphic for us because the film is soon to be released, and yes, if they can show it on the screen, you'll get a chance to see.
This is actually a representation of something that's in the movie, which was everybody was asked when they came to volunteer for Minnesota United. That was the group that was trying to defeat the amendment, to tell people who was on your heart, and you'd fill out a little heart and write on there something like, for my brother, or because I believe in love for all, or my part. As you can see here, people's different names on there.
Yes.
And these were just all over the campaign office, and we were struck by that this was kind of the symbolism that people were working in, that they were very cognitive, very aware of who they were doing this for. And the poster here is just supposed to kind of represent that, and hopefully people get that after they see the movie, or even get it before they see the movie.
So the hearts are a metaphor kind of for what was going on, entering into the heart as well as the head over the process and the course of developing and creating the film. So.
That's exactly it. I think you need to start with the emotion and the heart before you get to the logic for people.
Yeah. So if people want to go see the film, what can you tell us? When is it going to be released? Any idea?
Good question. I hope everybody's be able to see it everywhere. Ultimately, I mean, this is the problem with documentary filmmaking, is once you're done, you're only half done with the job. The other half is just trying to figure out how to get it in front of people.
Yes.
And do it in a way that is sustainable, because I could go rent a theater and take the risk myself, but I don't have enough money to do all that. So you try to talk some distributor into renting the theaters and taking the risk so it can be seen widely. And we're in the process of that. One of those processes is taking it to film festivals where distributors and other people might be able to see it. And so we've entered it, no guarantee it gets to be seen, but we've entered it in some of the biggest film festivals in the world, including Sundance and South by Southwest and the Berlin Film Festival. So we'll be finding out over the next several months whether it gets seen or not.
If somebody will pick it up and if it will be run or what.
But I am hoping, because it was a local film, that it will show up here at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival in April. I can't say that's a lock, but I'm very hopeful that people will be able to see it then.
Excellent. I know that your work at the Uptake, in addition to the film, brings other issues to your plate as well. And one of the issues I know that the Uptake focuses on quite a bit is our prison population and what's going on there. So get us up to speed and what's going on with incarceration in our state and what's happening there.
Yeah, this is something that's just recently hitting the headlines. It's an outgrowth of our coverage of structural racism, because we have a disproportionate number of minorities behind bars compared to the population that we have here in this state. And that's not just Minnesota, that is our country. We are spending $80 billion a year to keep a lot of people locked up for offenses that maybe don't need somebody locked up for. And so that's just made a huge explosion of the population in in prisons, not just in Minnesota but elsewhere. And in Minnesota, ours has been growing a lot recently, and that there's some technical reasons for that, but it's been pretty much really a stable population for the last few years. It could get larger though, as if certain laws are enforced the way they are, if sentencing guidelines, which the legislature is very likely to work on this next year, if sentencing guidelines aren't changed, because Minnesota sentences people for quite a long time, but they also keep them on parole for quite a long time. And when somebody's on parole, it's very easy for them to be suddenly sent back to prison for the most technical violations, for maybe not calling into a parole officer. They end up back in the can.
So that's a huge issue. Another big issue, of course, is privatizing prisons, and that's happening in many places. And of course, once it becomes a profit-making enterprise, it's to the advantage of the corporations who own those prisons to increase the population, not decrease the population.
There's that is definitely an issue. Luckily, in Minnesota, we currently do no longer have privatized prisons, and a lot of groups are worried that we might be headed back that way, because we have a prison in Appleton that's owned by a private corporation that has been sitting vacant for many years, and we have a need for a lot more prison cells, because all the state prisoners, a lot of them are being put in county jails and stuff because there's not enough room. So they're saying, let's not build a new prison, let's use this other one. And they're talking about renting it, but people are also concerned that this corporation might be in charge of it or have something to do with it. And they have a horrible record with human rights and a lot of other issues that I think justifiably so a lot of people are worried about. I think luckily it's both Democrats and Republicans. It's going to be a very hard push for them to maybe do that.
But sometimes for counties, cities, and states, it's very enticing when a corporation comes in and says, we can save you a ton of money, we can run this for you and decrease your prison budget, we can do it better, faster, cheaper, easier, and it's enticing to lawmakers to say, wow, we can get a huge savings, and that's true for both parties.
It is, but I think luckily a lot of groups have been out there to get the truth here, because in the long run, it costs us more money than it saves going through a corporation to do that, because they are not focused on it's the purpose of a prison is not to lock somebody up forever. The purpose of a prison, in many cases, is to get somebody back into life and operating in a way that they can. It's rehabilitation, because locking away somebody forever is a very expensive proposition.
Yes, and option of last resort, I guess I want to say.
And private corporations are not incentivized to do that. And so this is one of the reasons why something like that does need to be under the control of a state government. And I think a lot of our lawmakers on both sides of the aisle got that, but they need to be constantly reminded of that, because otherwise, yes, the enticement of, oh, we can save money is
it's out there, dangling out there like a carrot. If people want to know more about what's going on with prisons, about what's happening with your film, what's the best place? Where can they go on the internet to read more, learn more, and find out what's going on?
Well, one resource obviously is the uptake.org. You can find all of our latest stories there. You know, a live video of Prison Population Task Force, which is meeting, or the archive video. We'll have that there. Also, if you're interested in the movie How Love Won, just go to howlove1.com, and we'll have hopefully information about where you can see it once we know that.
So howlove1.com and the uptake.org. Wonderful places where people can go to learn more and find out what else is going on in our community. We just have a short time left, but I do want to mention that the Uptake did get national recognition, really, for coverage of Franken Coleman recount, did it not?
Yeah, that's where we kind of first got our notoriety, was the Franken Coleman recount, and we live streamed every recount that was going on, as well as all the court procedures. This is before people really knew how to do live video on the internet, and there's like 10,000 people watching at one point every day, just wondering what the outcome was going to be in Minnesota. They knew there was one place they could go to not just watch it, but discuss it with others, and that's kind of where we made our reputation.
So that's, it kind of built on that and moved forward. I think our time is almost out, but I do want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing what's going on the Uptake and what's going on with the film. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in and joining us. And until next time, thank you so much.